Hello everyone, my name is Ivan, you are watching the Donjon Shop channel, and we continue our series of videos on how to choose the right weapon for fights under the WMFC rules. And as you are probably already understood, our topic today is two-handed shafted weapons, which is rapidly gaining popularity among fighters in pro fights and in tournaments of Donjon Cup series. Let's start with why should a person ever take a heavy two-handed weapon in duels. We're used to see halberds and two-handed axes in mass battles, but as for duels, there was an opinion that a fighter with a sword and a shield will always have an advantage over his opponent with a two-handed weapon. However, this is true only for fights according to the classical rules, where hand-to-hand combat techniques and wrestling are prohibited. In professional fights, where all this is possible, practice shows us that the advantage of a shield and a sword at close range is not so significant. At a long distance, a fighter with a two-handed weapon has an obvious advantage, especially considering that he can get twice as many points for each hit. But more about this in detail we will talk a little bit later. And now let's see what kind of two-handed weapon we are even talking about. When we are talking about long-shafted weapons in HMB, we mean mainly two-handed axes, poleaxes, halberds, crowsers, and other similar and mainly chopping devices. Impact-crushing weapons such as two-handed hammers and flails are not allowed in HMB. Piercing weapons and weapons with various sharp hooks are also prohibited. Halberds and poleaxes can have a spike, but its point must be rounded to a radius of 1 cm, and the fighter cannot stop with this spike. According to the rules of Historical Medieval Battles International Association, there is a division into 1.5 and two-handed weapons. The weight of 1.5 X must be from 1,300 to 2,200 grams. The weight of a two-handed polearm must be from 2,200 to 3,200 grams. The total length of a 1.5 shafted weapon is to be from 90 to 130 centimeters, and the blade length is to be above 9 centimeters. The total length of a two-handed halberd or axe must be from 130 to 220 centimeters. The blade length should be above 12 centimeters. Axes and polearms with sharp angles of less than 90 degrees and angles that can be considered dangerous are prohibited. Consult the Marshal's Committee if you are not sure of the sufficient safety of your weapon. Models of weapons should not have sharp edges. The cutting edge of an axe must have a rounding and a thickness of at least 2 mm. There should be no chips and deep notches on the blade. Now let's see what additional rules for two-handed weapons there are in pro fights and WMFC tournaments. We remind you that according to the WMFC rules, all weapons must have a certain impact-weight distribution coefficient. Since long-shafted weapons do not have a guard on a handle, then, as in the case of one-handed axes, and we spoke about them here, you need to calculate not the coefficient, but the location of the permitted grip zone. This is done as follows. First, you need to weight your weapon in kilograms. Next, you need to divide the minimum permitted coefficient value by weight of your weapon. For men, this minimum value is 30, and for women, it's 25. From the result that you got after dividing, you need to subtract 5. Next, you need to determine the balance point of your weapon and measure out the resulting distance from it. This will be the edge of a permitted grip zone. It should be marked on the shaft with a black or white ribbon so that it is clearly visible. However, a two-handed shafted weapon is almost always a heavy weapon. I remind you that in order for your weapon to be considered heavy, it must have a grip zone with a coefficient greater than or equal to 45 for men and 40 for women. Hitting with such a heavy weapon brings 2 points per hit. The grip zone of a heavy weapon can be defined in the same way as the standard grip zone. The only difference here is that in this case you will need to divide the coefficient of 45 for men and 40 for women by the weight of your weapon. The edge of the heavy weapon's grip zone should be marked with a red or green ribbon. The color of the ribbon should contrast with the color of the handle. If a fighter plans to use his weapon both as a standard and as a heavy weapon, then the grip zones for both of these categories should be marked on this weapon, so that they can be clearly seen by marshals. There is also one important nuance. You will receive 2 points per hit only if you hold the weapon with both hands within the heavy grip zone. If you will hold the weapon when hitting with at least one hand above the heavy grip zone, then such hits will bring you only 1 point. Well, and if you will hold the weapon with at least one hand above the standard grip zone, then your hits will not bring points at all. Be careful to hold your weapon right. There are some more rules about holding a weapon. According to the WMFC rules, a two-handed weapon can be used without a lanyard. But in this case, when striking with this weapon, you are obliged to hold it with both hands. If you intend to swing your poleaxe while holding it in one hand, then you will need to make a lanyard on it, which will attach the weapon to your hand, as in the case of one-handed weapon. It's very uncomfortable to have a lanyard on a two-handed weapon, so it's better to hold your halberd or axe with both hands. Take care of the audience. So these were all the most important points that you need to know when choosing a two-handed shafted weapon for pro fights. By the way, for a competent selection of weapon you can contact our shop. We will help prompt select and deliver. The link to our website will be in the description. And that's all for today, dear friends. Subscribe, like, comment, and may your weapons always be allowed.